This is White Plains Week, the weekly news roundup. With your moderator, John Bailey, editor and publisher of the daily internet newspaper White Plains Citizen Net Reporter. Jim Benaroff, editor and publisher of SuburbanStreet.com and WhitePlains.com. And Peter Katz, noted broadcaster and journalist. White Plains Week. What's happened? Who are the newsmakers? And what's in store for the future? The views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the participants. White Plains Week is presented Fridays at 7:30 and again on Mondays at 7 p.m. here on Channel 76. Now, White Plains Week.
Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. White Plains, Westchester, and the world, and all you bioresearchers out there. We're open for business. Apply within. John Bailey, the Citizen-Net reporter on White Plains Week, as we start 2016 series of shows, our 15th anniversary this year, and it's a pleasure to be with you again, as I am once again have the pleasure of working with Peter Katz, the anchor for all seasons, and Jim Benaroff is on assignment. And right now, let's go to the headlines with Mr. K.
Thank you, John. And here are the headlines for White Plains Week, first show of the new year. And White Plains did usher in 2016 with a peaceful, spectacular New Year's Eve celebration downtown, which was quite well attended, so we hear. President Obama attempts to do something about the gun problem. He demonstrates passion and concern. He demonstrates frustration about Congress's lack of interest in regulating gun sales. The Common Council meets for the first time, and White Plains councilpersons are sworn in after having been reelected. John Kirkpatrick, in a surprise move, is elected the Common Council president. Governor Cuomo says no toll increase on the Tappan Zee Bridge until 2020, and he advocates for a tunnel connecting Connecticut with Long Island, at least for a study to see if it's feasible. The Attorney General's office in the state of New York is making what it calls an inquiry into the Esplanade, which is a senior living facility here in White Plains. Westchester County and the city supposedly are not being very active in trying to help seniors who have been told to leave the Esplanade to find another place to stay. They have to be out by July, so we're told. County Executive Rob Astorino addressed the Westchester County Association. John Bailey was there. Astorino announced a $1.2 billion biotech and research center to be built, he hopes, at the Grassland North 60 property right next to the county jail. John?
Well, not really quite next to it, but still, it was an interesting question. I asked him whether he was going to tear down the jail. He said no. It's really way on the other side. I would notice it. Well, I notice the barbed wire every time I drive in that vicinity. Now, let's go to the first Rolo Newsreel March of Time for January the 8th, 2016. And that, of course, is some shots of the ball drop at around midnight, December 31st.
Maine.
Right. And on the left, there you see the ball actually dropping in front of the bandstand, looking sort of at the bar building.
They had the Recreation Department's showmobile set up at the intersection of Maine.
Yeah, state of the art. State of the art, right.
And they did fireworks after that, right?
Absolutely, and that's the view into the Ritz-Carlton complex, where it was showing some of the reflections. And it was shot off the Macy's building, actually.
I was not able to go there, but I did see some of the coverage. Channel 12, News 12 Westchester, did live coverage from downtown. Unfortunately, they did not have a good, very wide-angle shot showing the complete setup down there, and the way the crowd was massed along Mamaroneck and Main Street, and perhaps Court, maybe some other side streets in that area. Maybe it spilled out onto Church Street. I don't know. I couldn't tell.
It was up on Court Street there, and around Macy's, and down in Renaissance Square.
Now, the city claimed that they had like 25,000 people attending. This year, for the first time, they set up security barriers.
Yes.
There were like
four
entrances. So in theory, they could have gotten a very, very accurate count of the
yes,
people
all
going
they had
in.
to do is do clickers. Whether or not they did that remains to be seen. But I'm telling you, 25,000 people is half of Yankee Stadium.
Well, it's half of Yankee Stadium. It's approximately 5 times the capacity of Radio City Music Hall. It's approximately 6 times the capacity of the bleachers at the high school.
Yes.
Perhaps even more than that. And in the pictures on News 12, the shots were such that you really couldn't get a comprehensive
there were no
look.
overhead pan shots.
In what we saw, it looked like maybe 1,500 or 2,000 people in what they showed, which is quite different from 25,000.
Well, it seemed like a happy crowd, though, Peter, and it was a very nice celebration.
Oh, absolutely, no question.
It's a good thing for White Plains.
In fact, Mayor Roach and some of the other officials there led the crowd in singing "Happy Birthday" to White Plains, because this year marks the 100th anniversary of the incorporation of the city.
Yes, and we found an interesting anecdote about that first meeting, which we'll tell you about shortly. Meanwhile, a somber note was struck this week by, once again, armed people this week across the country making news, being heavily covered for their use of guns to make a point. And President Obama took to the airwaves, and you observed it, and what did you think?
Yeah, actually, there were 2 Obama appearances. Just last night on CNN, he did a town hall meeting in which they brought in gun control advocates. They brought in gun advocates, and it was a very lively discussion with the president. It was in Fairfax, Virginia, and the president had what seemed like very, very civil discussions with even some of the far right-wing people in the audience who are afraid that the president is starting down a path of confiscating guns, and he absolutely has denied that. But earlier in the week at the White House, the president announced that he would take executive action on gun control in view of the congressional inaction we have seen. He spoke to a gathering of gun control advocates, victims of gun violence, and victims' families in the East Room at the White House. He told critics, especially Republicans on the campaign trail and in Congress, that what he's doing will not infringe on the people's right to bear arms, as guaranteed by the Second Amendment to the Constitution. The president declared that it's the victims of gun violence who have had their constitutional rights infringed upon. And in recounting some recent mass shootings here in the U.S., the president was moved to tears.
Our unalienable right to life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness, those rights were stripped from college kids in Blacksburg and Santa Barbara, and from high schoolers at Columbine, and from first graders in Newtown. First graders. And from every family who never imagined that their loved one would be taken from our lives by a bullet from a gun. Every time I think about those kids, it gets me mad. And by the way, it happens on the streets of Chicago every day.
Now, President Obama announced plans to issue executive orders to try to do some of the things which Congress has been blocking, such as hiring more agents for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, upgrading the capability to conduct background checks with greater efficiency when guns are purchased, expanding licensing agreements for those people who sell guns. And he reiterated that despite what the right-wing critics claim, he has no plans to confiscate guns from people's houses.
Right.
And it was pointed out last night in the CNN program that there are approximately 350 million guns in this country, located in more than 60 million places. And how could the government possibly go in and confiscate 350 million guns?
They could have a gun buyback, national.
Well, that's not
gun
confiscation,
buyback.
though. But
Yes.
how could you do that from
Yes.
from 60 million places?
But I don't see why there aren't more gun buybacks.
Well,
Because
there are.
yeah,
That's been
yeah.
tried very successfully in New York and here in Westchester too.
They should be able to turn them in every day at the police departments across the county, at least.
Anyway, being in a presidential election year in 2016, I have a hunch we'll be hearing a lot more about gun control.
That's right, but I thought that was a very historical moment where a president was moved 2 tiers in a national appearance and expressing not just platitudes on an issue, but something that had obviously really gotten to him. It doesn't seem to get to many of our elected officials in Congress, though, at all. In fact, they haven't hardly made any statements on some of the more recent incidents.
Well,
They're feckless.
Right after the White House appearance,
Then they started speaking out.
Well,
yes.
some of the Republicans did, reiterating their charges that this is the beginning of a stripping from the American people of the Second
And remember, a
Amendment
congressman was actually shot by a strange shooter out in
Well, it was
Arizona.
Gabby Gifford. In
That's
fact,
right.
she was
And
at.
They didn't get upset about that much
Well,
either.
she was at the
Yes.
CNN event last night at the town hall on gun control.
Right. Now let's go to the happy occasion of starting the Common Council for another year.
In the lower right-hand corner, that is the gavel which we are told was used to gavel to order the first meeting of the White Plains Common Council 100 years ago. And there you see in the center of the screen Mayor Roach holding it to gavel
The sacred
the
gavel.
meeting to order.
Yes, the sacred gavel, and he gavelled together, and the next order of business was swearing in the 3 Common Council persons who were re-elected. And first was Nadine Hunt Robinson, and next was Dennis Crolian.
That's
in the
him
center.
in the center.
Yes, and finally
Second from the left
Milagros
in the picture.
Lacuna.
Right.
Right. And next, they elected the Common Council president for the new year, and to my surprise, anyway, because you told me about it, was it was
John
John
Kirkpatrick.
Kirkpatrick.
Right.
Kirkpatrick.
I sort of thought that they might pick Milagros this time around, since last
She's
time...
never gotten to be council president.
Yeah, she had been interested in it last time when they selected John Martin to be the council president. So I would have thought that she would be up for it this time around, but for whatever reason, Kirkpatrick was selected. Interestingly, once again, in selecting the Common Council president, there was only one nomination. It seemed like a kind of a pro forma event. In fact, in a statement that he gave, Mayor Roach was reading from a prepared piece of paper which incorporated Kirkpatrick's name. So obviously this had been determined before the council meeting.
No nominations were expected from the floor, which they had an opportunity to do. And hey, why didn't somebody at least nominate Ms. Luquona and put it on the record.
Well, then that would have
That would have been
created some
an honor.
controversy. It would
Yes.
have created a real contest, and it would have.
She's overdue.
It would have brought a democratic process to the floor of the Common Council.
She's overdue to be
That was
council president.
that was a nasty thing for me to say, wasn't it?
It is important that we afflict the comfortable. Okay? Now, on to the shocker of the week, or shockers, since we are covering 2 weeks.
Well, I was shocked, let me tell you.
Yes, and it's, of course, Mr. Shock himself, Andrew Cuomo, who gives you a shocker a day, a press release a day, which just, from his unlimited printing press in Albany, he just churns out money.
Actually, I think he spends a lot of his time at his office in New York rather than at the State House in Albany. That's just
Right, I think it's his
an
helicopters
observation.
that keep coming up around 6 o'clock at night that I hear.
Anyway, so the shock was that he says that he wants to freeze the tolls on the Thruway. In fact, he promises that there will be no toll increase on the Tappan Zee Bridge or any part of the Thruway through at least the year 2020.
Yeah.
Now, that's quite amazing when you consider
That's 4 years.
that in the construction of the Tappan Zee Bridge and trying to find the money to do it, part of this was to be paid for by a toll increase.
Yes.
In fact, for many months, we right here had figured that the toll would have to go to at least $14. Now, that later was confirmed, actually, by some of the brilliant people who are involved in the planning of this.
And then when we
bridge.
they got some money for it. I refigured it to be about $11.50.
Right.
Because
Possibly holding
less
it around 11.
less loan. You know?
What Cuomo had said, if you go back a couple of years, was that it was time and fully justifiable to bring the toll on the Tappan Zee Bridge into line with the tolls on the George Washington Bridge, the tunnel crossings of the Hudson River, and other tolls charged in the New York metro area for commuters. So this not only is a reversal of what he had issued as his belief some years ago, but it also is a wonderful opportunity to prove the financial whizzes totally wrong in that you'll be able to finance the new Tappan Zee Bridge without raising the toll on it.
Quite frankly, we just wonder where the money is coming from to keep the construction going. Because
Well, not only to keep the construction going, but
out
to,
of the vast
to keep
lottery, for
to keep
example?
funding the Thruway as a whole without raising toll fees. We can fully expect other expenses on the Thruway to go up. So how are they going
But
to fund this?
this has not been a transparent process as to how they're figuring the cost of this bridge will be paid
Now,
for.
you know, once again, I think we do need to point out that we are not against this in any way, shape, or form. This would be a marvelous thing, great for New Yorkers, great for anyone who has to use the bridge, great for the local economy, tremendously helpful when government can hold the costs down on anything it controls.
Peter,
the question
that was a very nice thing to say.
the question is, how is he going to do this?
Well, Governor Cuomo always finds a way.
Let us hope that he really does.
Yes.
This would be a great thing.
But the real shocker of his double shocker this week was proposing the tunnel under Long Island Sound.
The idea
to relieve traffic on Long Island.
the
if you believe it or not.
idea had been proposed before.
Yes.
Cutting a tunnel from somewhere along the shoreline in this area. New York State ends at the Connecticut line. Westchester is it in terms of your ability to go east in New York State to put something under Long Island Sound. And then where does it terminate at the other end?
Yes. Does it terminate in Huntington?
Port
Does it
Washington, Washington, Huntington,
Greenport,
Kings Point,
Oyster
maybe
Bay.
take out a few of the mansions in Kings Point.
No, I mean it can't. It has to be between Port Jefferson and Greenport.
Well, there's a suggestion that it might begin in the Rye area, and
Oh,
go
they'll love
across
that
the Sound.
rye.
But anyway, so Cuomo proposes putting up $5 million to do a study of this idea. It has been said to have merit. In fact, there was some discussion, if you go back far enough, of a bridge across Long Island
The
Sound.
Rockefeller Rye Oyster Bay Bridge, one of his ill-fated proposals that went nowhere.
And we will have to see if the study actually gets off the ground and what those experts who do the study can come up with.
Well, let's be practical about this. Right now, to drive into New York City from Long Island to cross the Throgs Neck and the Whitestone and then continue on into the Triborough or whatever, the traffic starts at the Suffolk line.
Right.
Right. Now, so if you are going to add more traffic out of New England, including truck traffic, in through this tunnel, this might be really create the jam starting.
No, actually, it could relieve some of the congestion in the New York metro area. For example, if you're coming from the western part of the country, instead of having to go over the George Washington Bridge, you could go over the Tappan Zee Bridge. You could take 287, and we all know 287 never gets crowded, right? You could take 287.
Oh, not after the bus service will go into place at the end of this year.
Yes.
That's right, which I'm sure they're busy right now figuring out where the stations are going to be, and also if they've already purchased the buses. Come on, guys, tell us the good news.
So you could take 287 to I-95. You could take I-95 south to Rye along the coast. Then you could cut onto this tunnel to get across the Long Island Sound. So you've kept all of this traffic out of New York City.
You know what,
right?
Peter? You've just reminded me. We could have the Governor Andrew M. Cuomo Beltway, a huge 8-lane highway circling the New York metropolitan area, just like that wonderful road, the Beltway in Washington.
And John, that's how you pay for the Tappan Zee Bridge, by increased traffic going to Long Island over it.
I mean, and no mention of rail through this tunnel either. And no mention of rail for the Tappan Zee Bridge.
But that's something that could very well and probably should very well be looked at in this study. There's no timetable that I've seen.
Let's
for
save
getting the
$5
study
million
off the
and
ground,
not
but
study
we'll see.
it.
Yeah.
Let's study mass transit.
Anyway, so there were some other things happening here in
Exciting
Westchester County.
stuff.
You went to an event this week.
That's right. Robert Astorino, the county executive, addressed the adoring Westchester County Association, which always turns out in force, or at least a couple hundred people there, to see Mr. Astorino, next slide, who delivered, he started off with a mantra saying how the big problem is that too many politicians kowtow to the unions and build up their benefits, and it was actually a pretty anti-union speech at the outset, but the news that he had was he is proposing a $1.2 billion bio-research complex to be built on the North 60, which is the name given the property for grasslands which is not presently developed. It's on the, and that is what an interior of the project might look like. It's going to feature biotechnology research, medical offices, a children's science center, and a supporting hotel, retail stores, and restaurants, totaling almost 3 million square feet.
And they say this is going to create thousands of permanent jobs,
right,
which of course would be a boon to the economy. It's right in the area of the Westchester Medical Center and the jail in Valhalla.
However, at the press conference held by the after this, I asked, well, how is this going to be paid for? Because it's $1.2 billion. Now the developer is putting up $40 million. John Ferrari is the developer out of Greenwich. He is going to put up $40 million for the infrastructure because nothing exists, and then the rest is going to be not publicly financed, but privately financed. So we need investors now.
So they have something of a financing scheme. They have some renderings. They don't have full plans.
They don't have
yet.
approvals.
So this may very well go forward. And the timetable is what? 10
well,
years, 5 years, 2 years.
I asked the county executive, and he figured about 8 years, and I posed the question, so this is a 10-year project, right? And he said, no, about 8 years.
8 years,
yeah.
okay, well, that's all right.
But a lot can happen in 10 years.
Well, there's a 2-year project which may stretch out a little bit here in White Plains, and it's at the Esplanade, which has been operated as an assisted living type facility, as a senior citizen residence, and the city actually, you may remember, built a $17 million parking garage, allowing the Esplanade to use the top 3 floors of that. Right in the area. And the story is that the seniors there now have been told they have to be out, to get out, because the owner of the property wants to convert it into luxury apartments.
Right.
And we now find out that the New York State Attorney General's office is starting an investigation into just what's going on at the Esplanade. Well, this has been covered extensively by our friend at Channel 2 and Channel 10 News, Brian Conybeare, who you may remember.
Yeah, he interviewed some folks at the Esplanade.
He's been on this show a couple of times. Yeah. So whether the Attorney General is actually going to start an investigation, we don't know. They call it an inquiry. We will see what goes on with the Esplanade.
But I asked if the county was doing anything about this, and they were not aware of it. Just that they should relax 5 days a week.
Well, the question is, how, what do you do with the people? How do you help senior citizens, some of whom are in their 80s and 90s, some of whom
it's very
have
traumatic.
dementia? How do you help them find new places to live?
Well, the only thing the Esplanade is doing, they're holding some sort of field trip January 26th, and for persons that haven't found places yet.
To take them to look at other places.
And, however, it'll be interesting to see. The big question is, when the city built this parking garage, did they know they were going to convert the Esplanade into
luxury
rentals?
Apartments, sure.
Market rates.
And as luxury apartments, where the residents of the luxury apartments going to
That's
park?
What happens when the Common Council doesn't ask questions.
Anyway, you're going to be on WVOX throughout 2016, so we hear.
That's the theory, right?
And that's on Tuesday mornings. You do that?
Yes, with Dennis Nardone, and
WVOX is 1460 on your AM dial, right?
That's right.
And you have something on People to Be Heard.
Yes,
the
we
other
interview
program that we do?
Dr. Farouk Jaffrey on the flu at the new medical.
Can see it on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com or on YouTube, and you can see this there too.
Great. It's a great show.
And good night, John. Thank you.
Good night, all.
White Plains Week has been a presentation of White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, WPCNR.com, in cooperation with Channel 76. Comments may be emailed to WPCNR@AOL.com. The copyrighted print White Plains Cityscape by Leonard Weber is used courtesy of the White Plains Presbyterian Church. For information on its availability, you may contact the church at 761-8585. The views and opinions expressed on the preceding program were solely those of the participants. White Plains Week is presented Fridays at 7:30 and again on Mondays at 7 p.m. here on Channel 76. For White Plains Week, this is Seth Benarov speaking.